lightning round. Okay, hyper video check-in. Maybe if I actually do this well, it'll be like one of the few watchable videos where like, you don't need to cut out 50,000 different things. Okay, so like, yeah. Okay, here it comes. We can do this. Okay, so, oh, it's gonna be super echoey, so I just need to get this done anyway. All right, so the thing is, I was thinking about how men are so performative, but how it's not really like uniquely male by any stretch whatsoever. Like people are performative. And I saw this, not midget, or actually, yeah, a midget. So I'm really confused. So I just walked past him and I was just like, oh, excuse me, you know, because it was like, stepped around him exactly like a little kid, except for maybe the excuse me, because a child his size and height, I would have been about 3, and I'm 2 or 3 or 1, and I may well not have apologized or said excuse me because I was never really completely in their way. And besides, it's like saying excuse me to a tiny kid is a little bit like saying excuse me to your dog or your cat, which I do practice doing from time to time to practice the humility. Not sure how much good that ultimately does, but I think it can have its place. But anyway, so walk into the bathroom, start thinking about how I'd like to talk to him. Want to talk to him about terminology because there is a whole thing with like midget, dwarf, sensitivity, and then you got the new emerging consensus about how easy it is to offend everyone and how professionally offended everyone is supposed to become. And so it does beg the question. I mean, I've talked to a dwarf before, a person with dwarfism, and they said that the preferred term is dwarf. And then I made the mistake, you should call it, I suppose, of asking another person with dwarfism, and they said that they were very offended, and I will freely admit that it was a really stupid way to open a person who I was just meeting at a social function. It was a party. I didn't really know anyone else there. It was kind of her crew of friends, and as it turns out, she's one of those people who has a startling, should I say is it okay to say a startlingly obvious feature, or just a startling feature, or just a very interesting to some feature that they don't like to be singled out for, and I totally understand that. So her friends, in my words, this is gonna sound a little disrespectful, but her friends sort of play along in pretending like it's not a thing, which I can agree with to some extent, because we do make mountains out of molehills all the time, and many things aren't really things. In fact, one of my big issues with the emerging left consensus, as I call it, is that we are turning race into such a huge thing that we're making it a thing. And we're creating a kind of a Hutus and a Tutsis kind of precursor situation here in a really scary way that I think is serving the needs of the elites, if not being outright directed by them. I can't believe, why am I coming up with a good monologue in a echoey bathroom? I am so sorry. I should take this outside, but I'm really scared I would lose the intensity. So I'm gonna get through this. I might make another recording outside, but I have a feeling it'll be much calmer. And that has its downside too, because I won't get anywhere in some sense. So the point is that I told myself, well, you don't need to go up to this guy and come up with some clever question like, hey, do you mind being approached by strangers just because you're interesting? Or some other thing like that that risks trouble right from the outset. You can't say to someone who's the only African person in your entire town, do you mind if I talk to you just because you're black and I want to ask you about your blackness? Because if the answer is yes, you've already fucked up, and there's something very legitimate about that. Now, the only place where I would completely disagree with the emerging left consensus, let's call it the ELC, is that the person, according to the ELC, would be wise, or at least not in any way unwise, to become offended, ruin their own whole day, go on YouTube, make a mess, you know, Facebook post, and let's dox this guy. Not really, that's an exaggeration even of the radical left's behavior. Well, I don't know, the MAGA kid hats. The MAGA hat kids, it's not quite an exaggeration of some of the radical left behavior. I mean, you literally have death threats as a result of a smile that people didn't like. We don't like the look on your face. so we're gonna death threat you, is how that situation actually wound up happening, because ultimately the kid did absolutely nothing wrong other than have a potentially interpretable as smug look on his face, which I think was actually a defensive smirk. I think he was trying to be nice in a way that allowed him to save some face and hold his ground, and therefore it definitely had some ego input that he was putting into that. But I've been in that place many times where I'm feeling threatened, and the most politic expression that I can manage is a smile that probably came off as smug or smirking at the time. So literally nothing else wrong as it turns out, and you've got death threats. So this is a little post hoc, but it's really the rationale for not jumping to conclusions so much before you suggest that people be harmed. So I don't disagree with if a person happens to feel like, yeah, I don't want to talk to you just because I'm black or a midget, but thanks for asking. I get that. I totally get that. So that's why I thought to myself, well, okay, I already stepped past the guy. And I said, excuse me, real quick, and went around, and he didn't look up, he didn't make eye contact, he didn't say anything in response to excuse me. So I thought, well, if I'm honestly open, as my ex was trying to teach me to be a little bit, and much to her chagrin, I failed in time to satisfy that desire of hers while we were together. But if I am interested in acknowledging reality right in front of my face in real time, as I have often, in my own self-talk professed to want to try to learn how to do, then the answer is kind of written right there. He's not interested in interacting with strangers in general right now, and or certainly not interested in an interaction with me. Okay, there's my answer. Now, where did this video come from? Actually, I just wanted to make a comment to throw out an observation that I thought that others might find interesting, because maybe they've made similar observations and maybe never heard it corroborated. And if I could be that very first person to suggest to you that something might be legitimate that you yourself have noticed at some point in time and thought, God, am I just crazy about? It's that we are very performative creatures, and I could easily come up to him and probably engage with, in a, I would say honestly, fairly non-consensual way, to some degree. To some degree, we have to be careful here. Not the kind of non-consensual that can fairly incur punishment, but yes, a kind of non-consensual that would sort of reach into his social instincts and force him to respond. And I do recognize that I spent years practicing that with women, and the question I asked myself just now was, do women like that? And I thought, oh, God, it's like, it's complicated. It's like everything, it's fucking complicated. They do and they don't. And the simplest answer, though there's plenty of room for nuance here, and there should be more nuance, but I don't have time for it because I want to wrap this up, get the hell out of the bathroom, and let other people use it. I heard a try at the door, is that pretending that you asked the question, because who knows, maybe you did. I do think, as an aside, that men are in some ways, in some sense, more performative than women, but maybe that depends. Maybe there's plenty of senses where women are more performative than men, and like everything, when you step back and view it from a Quinian, rational perspective, like a Martian anthropologist, you find out that human beings are virtually identical, just like every other animal. The male chimps and the female chimps may act a little different, but they act like chimps. And human beings are very performative animals according to culture. Cultural, we're instinctually very cultural. It creates a lot of little paradoxes. For example, do humans do X, Y, or Z instinctually that they do mostly culturally? Well, yes, because they're instinctually cultural. Paradox answered? Not quite. We could go on and on about this for centuries or millennia of philosophical musings, and hopefully occasional insight. So now, what am I on right now? Honestly, just some kratom and some coffee and a diet. I think I'm getting into some light, early stage, like 24-hour ketosis for the first time in a very long time, and really, really enjoying it. I suddenly discovered that my coffee addiction was heavily tied in with sugar. and probably my booze addiction too, was 50 or 80% a sugar addiction, a carb addiction. So actually feeling this energy and excitement is enlivening in such a way that I feel like I have so much excess energy that I'm gonna maybe wind up actually posting this horribly echoey video on the tubes for your edification. I think, like so many other questions of do women want it, the answer, pretending that you asked this question and thereby wrapping up the whole video as if you had asked this question, which may in fact even become the title of this video, do women want to be approached or not? And it's yes, they want to be approached and not. They want to be approached when they want to be approached and by whom they want to be approached. And that generalizes. Do women want to be seduced using social conventionality to more or less non-consensually, not legally non-consensually as I said, but in a real sense non-consensually, force and induce responses based on pro-social behavior? You notice a woman, you can tell by her dress and demeanor that she is a normal, pro-social, functional person. If you happen to be a hetero male and you want to talk to her, you can always walk up to her and ask her, hey, excuse me, can I have the time? Or do you know the way to this and that? I wound up having an incredible experience in South Korea that way when I was much younger, and I really wonder what could have happened if I had bothered to keep in touch with her. So, it comes down to exposing a certain hypocrisy in both male and female behavior in this regard, generalized, stereotyped, not all men, not all women, male and female behavior, kind of pattern recognition technology that any biologist feels perfectly comfortable using, knowing and implying from the beginning that we're not morons and we know it doesn't mean every single person in every single case, that men are often, and women too, in different examples, taking advantage of social norms to sort of, in a non-punishable, in my opinion, way, force the other person to do something that is somewhat non-consensual. And women also expect that, because if it's Prince Charming, you're damn skippy, she wants to be swept off her feet, which by definition pretty much means against her will, but it's against her conscious will. And as Robert Greene said in The Art of Seduction, I believe maybe in the introduction, we are all, to some extent, desirous of being the happy victim of a successful seduction. And with that, I leave you and bid you adieu, redundantly, and so, mew.